Hello and welcome to this video podcast series hosted by the Symbiosis Center for Research in Media and Creative Industries. My name is Dr. Sneha Gore Mehendale and I am a faculty member at the Symbiosis Institute of Media and Communication. In this podcast series, we talk to an academic and understand a lot of concepts related to research, to academy, to theories, so on and so forth. Today, for this research talks, we are joined by Dr. Anabel Quan-Haase, who is here from the Western University, Ontario, Canada. She is a sociologist by training, but engages in a lot of interdisciplinary work. And her writings and her research trace the impact of technology on society at large. So, Dr. Quan-Haase, welcome to SCRMCI podcast, and thank you very much for joining here today. Could you tell us what do we mean by digital media theories and specifically what is the reason behind inclusion of word digital in that, as in how different are they from legacy media theories or conventional media theories?
Yeah, well, thanks, Neha, so much for having me. It's such a real pleasure to be here today. And I think this is an important conversation and that we don't have enough. I think people often take terminology like digital media theory just as a given, right? Because it's everywhere. We see digital media everywhere. So you kind of think, okay, well, there's no need really to think about these concepts more deeply. So um, I do think that there's a lot of unpacking that has to be done here with a term like that.
Mm.
First of all, theory, of course, is kind of at the center of what scholarship is all about. And there are all kinds of theories. So, I mean, when I say theory, I really mean it very broadly because, theory could be more on a quantitative side, like a predictive theory, or it could be just theoretical, something like the work of, Foucault or something like that, where like the theory is really much more deep and complex. So I think it's important to kind of start the conversation by saying that there's a wide range of theory.
Mm.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, there is kind of this idea that maybe digital media theory is something that is unique and different. And the reason why we need to unpack that, and it is a little bit more complex, is
Mm.
because a lot of digital media theory doesn't like start at some specific point in time, right? Like, I mean, I've been doing this work almost 30 years. Like it's a long time. And I'm sometimes surprised about how people think that, it's kind of like more recent work or it just started. I mean, we've really been thinking about technology for decades. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of people used email in the 70s. So there's been a lot of theorizing that has been happening ongoing. The other thing that is really important here is that digital media theory, even though, as you pointed out, I think so well, it kind of points to something unique about, that kind of digital component. The reality is that we draw really on a lot of work that has happened in the past. So it's not as if digital media theory comes out of nothing. So just to give you one example, Goffman,
Mm.
Irving
Yes.
Goffman, classic work and a presentation of self and everyday life. I mean, a book that I really love, and maybe many of you have perhaps read and encountered in your studies.
Mm.
It's a theory that was developed way before any technology in the way we think of it today, or even social media has started. But it can be so foundational when you bring it into the digital. And when we bring it into the digital, it doesn't mean that the theory stays the same, which is why we call it digital media theory, because we update and expand the theory to kind of understand the digital. So let's say something like in Goffman's theory, like the presentation of self being the backstage and the front stage,
Mm.
right? Where the
Mm.
where the backstage is something where you're at home, something that you don't present to your colleagues at
Right.
work, you don't maybe present to your friends, but it's kind of when you're relaxed, you're just yourself. Um, so when we look at a theory like that, it can really help us understand what happens online, let's say to influencers, because you wonder, well, what is the influencer's life like? Is this
Mm.
a window into their selves,
Mm.
right? Into who they really are?
Mm.
What is the authenticity piece here? But when we use something like Goffman, we clearly start to understand that there's a backstage and a front stage, and that clearly, the influencer uses the platform to present a front stage. And I think that if we can use these kinds of theories more, we
Right.
would gain a much deeper understanding and a more critical kind of understanding of, what social media does, how it works, and how it operates. And that even helps with things like, for example, self-comparison, which is
Mm,
something that affects so many young people, in particular women
mm,
today, where they compare themselves with the influencers who present this kind of very stylized, fashionable, perfect self.
yes.
But if you understand that that's a front stage, then maybe you look at it a bit more skeptical. And rather than maybe comparing yourself directly with the influencer, you realize that maybe this is a model, but not really like a realistic role model. And
Right.
so I think that the theory here,
Mm,
once updated into the digital,
mm,
becoming a digital media theory, can help, can have real implications for education of young people, for policy development. And I think some of that work actually has been very actively happening here in India,
yes.
where, influencers have to disclose when they're working, with companies, with
Yes.
brands. So you can kind of see how theory, and in particular digital media theory,
Mm,
is not just an abstract concept,
mm,
quite the opposite. It's something that actually helps, so many aspects of education, policy, young people's identities, young people's self-esteem, and so on, health, like in terms of their health, not
right.
having depression, not feeling anxious. So I think digital media theory in today's digital hyper connected world is so central and important.
Absolutely. In fact, this leads me so well into the next question I had in mind, where, as media academics or researchers, despite being a researcher, we all are still audiences who consume media day in, day out.
Tell
So,
me about it.
so as a consumer of media, as an audience, um, or somebody who's experiencing digital media in every part of their life, how does the understanding of digital media theory help us problematize our everyday living better?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I like that question because it really is very personal to me. I have two kids. I have a girl and a boy. So I'm very fortunate and lucky and have very good relationships with them. Um, but I must say that, having like a deep understanding of digital media theory, and really critically thinking about it and working, in
Mm,
this area like every day of
yeah.
my life, has really brought some important, messages,
Mm,
learnings to how I interact with my kids,
yeah.
how I am at home, what our home environment is. So I agree. I think digital media theory, as a scholar, can directly impact you. And just to give you one example, when my son was growing up,
Mm,
around maybe 11, we decided to give an iPad, like a tablet kind
yeah.
of technology. And he loved it. It was a great gift, right? It was meant to be something positive, but it quickly became something of contention, right? So maybe as a parent, you're a little bit naive. And I mean, I
Mm,
admit I'm a digital media scholar and maybe I should have known better. But the moment you give a child technology that is theirs, right? Like it wasn't like it was mine and he was allowed to use it, but it was given to him. He had the agency over the technology. It became very contentious because you start asking questions like, well, how long should they be on the device?
yeah.
What should they be doing on the device? How much control should a parent have over what they're doing? And I
Mm,
mean, kids have agency, they're growing up as individuals. So clearly they also want to have a say in this,
yep.
right? So it's
Yeah.
not like they just go, "Oh, mom, I'll do whatever you say." No, it becomes a contentious area.
Yeah.
So luckily, understanding that, for example, gaming can be good for kids
Mm,
if they do it, in very limited amounts of time in their day. So really having that understanding that once you surpass a certain amount of time, that it becomes something negative in their lives. So that gave me a lot of strength as a parent to be able to say, you know what, it's okay. If you've done your homework, you can do 20 minutes of gaming, but that's it. So I was kind of like, I was really using the research, the digital media theory around parenting, around the socio-technical, right? The social world you're in, your
yeah.
child, they're growing up, their education, to kind of understand what kind of uses and when is appropriate. So another example is just having, dinner, which is a very social moment during the day,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we're all busy, kids are busy, it's very stressful. You're managing as a parent, often
Yes.
work, housework, etc. So then dinner is finally a time where the family comes together. So to me, having that as a technology free time where the kids could talk to us, where we could interact with them was really important. So I think, again, understanding of like privacy, social accessibility, a lot
Mm,
of these theories of digital media
mm,
helped me understand the importance of these moments and to be
mm,
able to be quite firm about it,
mm,
right?
mm.
Because sometimes at work, there may be something urgent
Yeah,
happening and you're kind of paying attention to your email or
yeah,
waiting for a call. So, I mean, to just understand, well, that doesn't matter, right? At this
yeah.
point, what matters is to be here with your kids and to let go of the technology. And we still do that today. And I think, that's something that has really kept that relationship with my kids so strong.
Yeah, that's great to hear. But apart from being a parent, or apart from the family moments, I would say along with the family moments, are there any, let's say, examples from our professional lives, or something to do with work emails, colleagues, more secondary social interactions? Any examples that you can think of?
Yeah, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that because just yesterday a study came out, a Canadian study, showing how texting often can lead to conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how it is here in India, but in Canada, often people use the short form K in a text message to kind
For
of say,
okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that most people find that really rude and unsincere.
Okay.
Um, so when the reporter was asking me about this, because they were asking me, well, the study just came out. Can you comment on the study? And I kind of realized that a lot of the digital media theory, that I've studied, kind of really helps me with this and with kind of work conflict and work communication. Because you realize that when you're relationship building, often, even though you're living in a hyper connected, fast paced world, at the end of the day, all of us really want to feel heard and understood. So even when you're having conflict at work, we need to take a moment and realize that quick communication doesn't always get us what we want or build the relationships that we're aiming for. So I really think very carefully about messages. So one example is because I'm an administrator and as
Mm-hmm.
associate dean of the faculty,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always managing a lot of problems and conflicts and issues, which I'm very happy kind of to help understand. But what I've learned is that if something difficult comes in, like an email, don't reply right away. No, the most important is to just read it, let it stay there for a moment, even though people often expect quick
Yeah.
communication. There's kind of that, social norm
Yes.
that email is fast. Sometimes it's good to just take a moment and kind of rethink.
Mm,
And then when you do answer, I
mm,
think you need to answer kind of more fulsome, right?
mm,
Do almost like a face to face communication,
mm.
even digitally, and most people find it really difficult to do. But when we're in face to face, we have so many other cues to draw from, right? A
Right.
person's facial expression, their body
Yeah.
language, their tone of voice. So try to integrate all of that multimedia, right? That
Mm,
kind of richness into the communication. So to me, that is difficult. It's a skill you learn,
mm.
like at school, at the media schools. How do we communicate effectively?
Right.
But to me, in today's digital world, that is a core skill to have, in particular in work environments
Mm.
when you're dealing, potentially with, difficult situations or conflict.
True. Very true. Couldn't agree more with this. This, in fact, brings me to the next important point that, you know, uh, all of us have been discussing for, all of us as in media academics has been discussing for several decades now. Um Initially, in terms of media research or theories, there was a lot of technological determinism, where it was far and widely believed that technology, it's like technology is in itself, it's a complete thing in itself, and technology decides how technology wants to get shaped. And then for the last 3 or 4 decades, there has been a strong thought which says that no, technology is not like the end all be all of everything, and it does get shaped by society to a very large extent. And then we have this whole ideology or whole approach called social construction of technology. So I would request you to tell all our audience in simple terms, what does this notion of social construction of technology mean?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that question. I think if we go back to media theory, somebody like the Canadian, very well known theorist, Marshall McLuhan,
McLuhan, yes.
I mean, McLuhan very eloquently said the medium is the message.
Yes.
And there's a lot of truth to that,
Mm.
a lot of truth. So, I mean, we were just talking a minute ago about, not having technology while you're having dinner.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter what technology it is, whether it's a book, whether it's radio, television,
Mm.
an iPad, a computer. At the moment that you're having dinner,
Yep.
all of those technologies will be distracting from the family unit, from just telling stories and finding out how everybody's doing. So, for sure, I think, technological determinist theories like McLuhan's, the medium is the message, can be really instrumental in
Mm.
understanding, society and so many aspects
Mm.
of, social effects. Similarly, looking at social determinism can also be really important because, there's social norms where, maybe you're in a classroom, we do a lot of the teaching. Well, I expect my students to not, be texting, to not answer phone calls while they're in a classroom.
Yes.
So this is social determinism. The
Mm.
norms of the classroom, the respect to you as a teacher, right, are so important
Mm.
that should overtrump the technology need to maybe answer a call.
True.
There may be a few exceptions. I say to my students sometimes, if you're expecting an urgent call, that is fine, but come and talk to me before so I know what's going on. So there again, the social, right? You talk to the person, there's a social norm, but there can be an exception. It is negotiated.
Yes.
So absolutely. So I think social determinism also has a place in terms of understanding the role of technology today. And I mean, it's everywhere, right? It's in
Yeah.
a home,
Yeah.
it's in a classroom, it's in institutions, it's on the street. But at the same time, when we look at, the socio-technical or theories like social construction of technology, we often abbreviate it to SCOT. I know um, academics like doing that.
Yeah.
Um, I think this technology provides us with a unique opportunity.
Mm.
And the reason is because Scott understands or makes us think about the design phase.
Mm.
So rather than most of what we do as academics, which is catch up, right? We look at, let's
Yeah.
say, video games and
Mm.
think, how is it affecting children?
Mm.
How is it affecting the home? We work with designers during the design phase.
Mm.
And that helps us to understand really how is the technology crafted from the get-go.
Mm.
So that can provide really critical insights.
Mm.
Let's say something like AI, right? Which is kind of
Yeah.
so prevalent now in
Yeah.
society. How is AI being designed?
Mm.
What ethical parameters, what guidelines are being included? So I think that what the socio-technical allows us to do
Mm.
is to really understand design from the get-go, right?
Mm.
Rather than not trying to catch up later on the effects of the technology, we look at what were the considerations can, for example, or even should designers and technologists work more with sociologists and
Mm.
media theorists so that we can actually build these technologies
Yeah.
with people in mind.
Yes.
That to me, that's critical. And that's why these kinds of tools are so important in
Yeah.
a society where constantly innovating. And innovation is important, but it
Yeah.
has to be innovation with people coming first.
Yeah. It's more of a socially intelligent designs.
Yes,
Yeah.
I like that.
So, talking about these social issues which shape technology or the adoption of technology, um, are we also looking at deeper social issues like conflicts or issues of race or of gender? And do they interact with technology in some way? Do they affect the adoption of technology in some way? What do you have to say on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is one of the, in Canada at least, one of the topics of most relevance
Mm.
today. So we just had an election very recently. So we have a new prime minister.
Mm.
But I think a big part of a pre-election time is often debate and discussion
Mm.
around, policies, political issues. And I think that's where there's more opportunity to, for example, bring in controls in terms of technology design. So, for example, if I have an opinion, I'm having a discussion, and then there suddenly is like a personal attack or hate speech, how as a user, how can you manage that, right?
Mm. Mm.
Or, how do you report that? So I think there's an opportunity really here in social media to have more design elements that help protect users so that
Mm.
you can flag a message that is inaccurate, right?
Mm.
And I mean, we saw that really during COVID-19. I mean, this was an incredible global crisis that
Yeah. Yeah.
affected all, all nations, all people, all institutions. So at the time, people often, because we were all at home,
Yes.
we went to social media for information and updates. So what happens when you have an ecosystem where there's so much dis and misinformation?
Mm.
I mean, that is really hard for an average user to navigate. And I
Yes.
mean, we know a lot of the research demonstrates that, everybody, even experts, we all fall under misinformation because it's so well made, so well
Yes.
construed. So I think there's a real opportunity in design to have more ways of flagging,
Mm.
harassment, hate, dissemination, disinformation,
Mm.
so that it's eliminated from platforms much quicker, right? Without really creating the large repercussions that we've seen so far.
Absolutely right. And I think something that more, let's say, innovators or designers should think about when they're designing new technology, so to say. So, Professor Annabel, before we part, a last question for the more generic audience. So, if somebody wishes to develop more understanding of digital media theories, are there any resources or authors or books that you would recommend that they can start reading? Um, Sort of to get acquainted more with this domain of research? Anything that you would like to recommend?
Well, I think there's a lot of good starting points here
Mm.
for readers. I mean, I could give you a very long list, but just very simply, I mean, I wrote Technology and Society,
Mm.
and it's a book that really gives a broad overview for a readership,
Mm.
on issues of the intersection of the socio-technical. It very like it has a wide range of topics that it covers, including things like social relationships,
Yeah.
community building, privacy, labor. So I do think it's a good first start. But to be honest with you, there's been so much amazing work.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot to explore in this area.
Yeah, definitely. So, on this note, Professor Annabel, thank you very much for appearing on this podcast and engaging in this such a beautiful, free flowing conversation with me. I'm sure our audience has loved this and they would want to read more on the digital media theories. And I encourage everybody, I encourage all the readers, all the audiences to read more on this and also to keep tuned for the SCR MCI podcast. We'll stop here. Thank you very much.